In this video, we're going to be looking at 5 custom plant support trellises that were built by members of the community. These are all made with off-the-shelf electrical conduit, which you can find at pretty much any big box store, like a hardware or home improvement store. We like to get it at Do It Best or a True Value if you've got one of those near you. And these are also made with maker pipe connectors. That's what these fittings are here. That's being used to join these pieces of conduit together. And you can customize your projects really easily. You don't have to use any power tools or any welding. You can just use a simple handheld pipe and tube cutter to cut frames to the dimension that you need, and then you can use a 5mm hex wrench for your maker pipe connections. And using those tools and these materials together, you can create some really great trellises, as we've seen in the community time and time again. And these 5 ones that we're going to look at today are just as awesome as some of the ones we've looked in the past. And these are all ideas that you can recreate really easily or customize for your own needs. And this first one is a lean-to trellis that Jennifer put together. And it's really cool. She basically wanted to have a plant support here against this wall, but she still wanted to be able to open up her windows here, these awning style windows. So what she did was really fantastic. It's just essentially these frames that just have 2 verticals. And I think this is just freestanding up against the wall. So these aren't staked into the ground or anything. And essentially she just has these verticals going up at an angle, and they're just kind of going straight up just like that. And then essentially she's using the maker pipe T connector to grab onto those vertical posts and then just add these cross supports here between them. Did the same thing at the very top, just there. And then the last thing she did was use maker pipe 45-degree connectors, and that just adds this angled piece that's up against the wall here with some rubber pipe feet to protect the wall, keep it from getting scratched up. And nice and simple, just 6 connectors per trellis. And this is a really awesome idea. And it just has some cattle panels supported to the frame. Looks like they're just zip tied on there. And as we can see in this other photo that she shared, we can see that it looks like it's working great for the plant. She said she's had it up for 3 years and it's working great, which is just awesome. And again, just a really fantastic idea that you can incorporate into your garden. So thanks so much, Jennifer, for sharing this. Love seeing it. Next up is a build that MV is calling a 3-branch trellis, which is really cool. And essentially this is just kind of a single panel trellis, kind of like we've seen in the past from the community, where it's just one vertical. It's not like a box, because we see boxes often, but this is more of just 3 verticals to create one single panel, and then a horizontal piece that goes from one side to the other at the very top there. Let me use a different color so you can see that better. Just one horizontal pipe going all the way across, using just that same connector we saw from Jennifer, the maker pipe T connector, to grab on and attach the vertical to the horizontal piece. And then the reason that MV calls this a 3-branch trellis is because they are using a maker pipe 180-degree connector to add these branches sticking off here. So that the 180-degree connector just grabs onto the horizontal bar, adds these 2 wings sticking off, and essentially they just did that wherever they wanted to add trellises. What's really cool is they made 2 versions of this. They have this first one, and then here's one that's a little bit smaller, attached to a really small garden bed. But we can see a close-up here of this idea that they're using to attach the tomahawks to the frame, which is really awesome. And essentially they got some off-the-shelf hanger straps. You can find those in the same aisle as the electrical conduit. And essentially those just clamp around empty conduit, and those have a hole that normally you can use to secure conduit to flat surfaces or vice versa. But they're just using that to hook the tomato hooks onto, which is really clever and smart. Haven't really seen that a whole lot in the community, but a really great idea to secure trellis netting to a frame, and just an awesome job, an awesome trellis all around, and an awesome idea for adding those tomahawks to the framework. So really cool, MV. Thanks so much for sharing this. Really great to see. Next up is a recent build that was shared by Matthew, and this is more than just a trellis. This is a massive structure, as we can see here, that is going around a bunch of different garden beds. And we see this from time to time with gardeners in the community who have very large gardens and a lot of space to work in, where they essentially make one giant structure that goes around the whole frame or the whole garden, and then they can utilize that and kind of customize the frame throughout the different seasons. And that's exactly what Matthew built this for. You can see here that he's got some trellis netting and attached to the horizontal bars, and those are going down to his plants in the garden. And that's pretty much the same throughout the build, as we can see a bunch of string attached and going down. That's really cool, but this frame is made to also act as a shade. So because it's a giant grid, basically a rectangular grid over the whole thing, he can then just add sunshade or even greenhouse plastic to this frame if you wanted to at some point. But he said shade material to the top of this frame and to the sides, can secure that in place and then add some shade protecting the garden from the sun, which is really awesome. And just a really elaborate build, really just a giant rectangular cube with a lot of bracing in there with 45-degree connectors and adjustable angle connectors we can see. And yeah, just a really great build and a great idea. Kind of maximize the space, build one giant frame that meets all your needs, and then customize certain bits and pieces of that frame as the season change and as your garden changes. So that's really cool. Thanks so much, Matthew, for sharing this. Great job. Next up is a cool one. This comes from Narav, and this is awesome. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but this is a really cool build. They have a birdie's raised bed here, as we can see, and essentially they just made, like I said, we commonly see these box-style designs with empty conduit and maker pipe, where essentially it's just 4 verticals going up here, and you got one kind of in each corner. And then he's using the maker pipe 90-degree connector to grab onto those and make these corner connections, which allows you to have one piece of conduit in the middle, and then the 2 pieces that come out at a 90-degree angle to make that cube shape. And then just using 4 of those in the corners, you can make this cubular frame. And then he's got some maker pipe T connectors that we've seen a bunch from different frames to add these cross supports here, going from one side to the other. And that's really cool. Same thing on the other side down there, as we can see. And then what's really cool is he's also using the maker pipe T connectors to grab on to the top part and then added these arches to the frame, which is really awesome. And I'm not sure if he did this just for looks or if it's for adding greenhouse plastic to kind of give it that arched look and to also keep rain from pulling on top whenever there is shade on top. Not really sure if that was the reason, but it looks cool nonetheless. And it's just an awesome trellis with some netting secured to the frame, as we can see there. And it looks like a really great solution and just an awesome idea all the way around and looks really great. So thanks so much for sharing this, Narav. Really great build. Last but not least are a couple of trellises that I think are pretty awesome and kind of designed in a way that we haven't really seen a whole bunch from people, which is why I wanted to highlight them here. The first one here is on this left, and this is just the single panel design that I talked about that we see from time to time. And essentially this one, is pretty standard, except instead of using all maker pipe connectors, he's using a maker pipe accessory known as the crossover clamp. And this comes from Darren, by the way. And essentially the crossover clamp it kind of intersects the conduit without you having to break up the span. Essentially just secures and clamps the conduit pieces together, as opposed to having to cut the conduit to secure them together with a maker pipe connector, as we commonly see in most of the frames from the community. But these are all crossover clamps here, and then the very top, he actually is using the maker pipe T connector to grab on those horizontal bars, or the top horizontal bar with the vertical pieces. So that's really cool and a unique design that we haven't seen that often. Then what's really cool about this other frame is this is more of like an A-frame design, but it's a very narrow and slender A-frame, and he accomplished this using T connectors, but they're just kind of side by side and spaced slightly apart, so they can angle and go down to the each side of the garden bed, and you can see there's a gap between them that kind of gets larger and larger until it gets to the very bottom. And that's just creating that very slender A-frame that he then secured this hardware cloth to. It looks like he just zip tied those there, I think, or maybe that's some metal wire. I think it looks like zip ties to me, which is a really common way to add the actual support for your plants. Once you have the frame in place, you can secure cattle panels or netting, anything like that, using zip ties, whether it's the nylon classic zip tie or the metal ones if you need some better strength and longevity from that solution. But this is a really cool design. Like I said, not something we see very often, and I don't know if we've seen this before, really, this kind of A-frame design with the T connectors. So that was really awesome, Darren. Thanks so much for sharing that, and thanks to everybody for posting your builds. As always, we love seeing them. I hope you got some inspiration from these trellises. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those down below in the comments, and we'll get back to you with any information that we can give. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.